The 2010s proved to be a mixed bag when it comes to the quality of films produced.
On one hand, the independent film industry this decade became stronger than ever. They came out with a great number of films every year, from film festivals such as Cinemalaya, Q Cinema, Pista ng Pelikulang Filipino, etc. A lot of these films would even go on and receive international acclaim. Not bad for films that aren't even produced with a huge budget.
However, most people won't even consider these films as movies that defined this generation or decade. Why? Because people are not even aware of these movies, apart from a few exceptions, of course.
The movies that dominated the box office this decade,
they're well marketed and feature a strong cast. Sure, they're not award-winning or internationally acclaimed for the most part, but are they worth seeing?
Are they any good? And what does this have to say about this generation of moviegoers? Stick around because
we'll be going deep into the top 10 highest grossing Filipino movies of the decade, and as of the making of this video, of all time.
So this list should have been made by the start of the new year. However, I did anticipate that there would be changes coming from the 2019 Metro Manila Film Festival, since they do churn out box office hits almost every year. I expected Vice Ganda's The More the Merrier to make the list. But funny enough, a different film made it to the top 10 list, and that is Miracle in Cell number 7. And while the numbers released by that movie and Hello Love Goodbye were in the middle of their theatrical run, the point is that they made the top 10 and won't affect the way I review them. Any updates on their standing in that list, I'll post in the comments. With no further ado, let's begin. Coming at number 10 is Boy, Girl, Bakla, Tomboy. Honestly, out of all of Vice Ganda films, and you know how I feel about those if you're a subscriber of mine, this movie is the strongest one, at least when it comes to the concept. Yes, I said his.
Let's just stick to the pronoun from here on because this movie's title is Boy, Girl, Bakla, Tomboy, and nothing really matters now because of that.
Anyway, the concept is pretty cool. It shows VG playing one character per gender stated in the movie's title. And I think it has the best Vice Ganda performance in this list, which is not saying much. But the problem is that it came at a cost. Since Vice played 4 characters, any of the side characters took a backseat, and it ended up feeling like you're watching one person debating with themselves. And yes, I just did say that this is the best Vice Ganda performance in this list, but that does not mean I think it's good at all. Each of the characters was played as stereotypically as possible: a boy, girl, gay, and a lesbian. You can pretty much guess what kinds of interests and personalities these characters have by just looking at them. They're walking cliches. Though this is a writing issue more than it is a performance one, still there is no excuse for producing trash.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
This movie does have a few positives though, I'm not gonna lie. It did have some sort of plot you can follow, which is pretty stupid, thinking what I said is something to praise about. The plot goes the way you'd expect it though, since it's so basic and predictable. It's mediocre at best. Okay, The Amazing Private Benjamin. First of all, I have a lot of issues in this movie, I'm not gonna lie. Just so you know, buckle up guys. Firstly, the fight sequences suck.
For example, one of these bad guys picked up an assault rifle,
but didn't kill Private Benjamin. You know, just these little things that take you out of the film. I know this is not an action film, I know that it's just a comedy, whatever the fuck that means. But it's a movie, it's supposed to immerse the viewer, it's supposed to not make you think it's a movie. Vice Ganda apologists like to argue that this is just escapism and entertainment. This just proves that this movie isn't even something that you can escape into. Call it a comedy with unrealistic rules, but there's just no excuse for lazy staging, editing, choreography, and direction.
Tell me, is this the level of quality you're willing to spend your money on?
The acting is just very much bland, there's no characterization. The final act just completely did away with what little storytelling and setup they had at the first 2/3 of the movie. The strong points of this movie is that they did have a coherent plot,
terribly executed, but you could follow it at least.
But really, by the final act, you feel like you wasted your time. The video game effects are shit, the stunts are shit, shit. I wish at least the jokes at least landed. With as much time they spent away from the story to tell a joke, you'd think that this movie at least deserves to be called funny, but I can't even credit them that.
Hindi daw po talaga nagbibiro si Jan Jaranjan. Pasasabugin niyang buong Pilipinas.
Really? Janjaranjan as your villain's name?
I don't really care how they name their characters, but it's obvious they're trying to be funny, and it's not funny. They spend a frustrating amount, like 80% of the story to tell jokes. Any positives? I guess Bimbi's pretty cute in this movie. And also a pretty cool guy character, but that's it.
Miracle in Cell Number 7. This movie did in fact make a huge fraction of its money in the following decade, 2020. However, we'll include it here since it was released in 2019. Let's start off by saying that this movie is the only one in this list that is adapted from an existing piece of work. There does exist a Korean film of the same name. I haven't seen it, but comparing the two trailers, it's apparent there is a major difference in quality. Without getting too much into the specifics, I can say that I really enjoyed the movie. The twists and turns of the film got me hooked. Though I saw the ending around 20 minutes before we got there, I can't fault it for being predictable, because knowing what will happen in the story actually enhanced the experience. It made the story better.
An almost flawless execution of the plot. Even though I can completely credit this movie for that, it's still great, and enough to carry this movie, all things considered.
With that said, seeing the original film's quality, it's obvious that this film didn't reach its potential production-wise.
The Korean trailer claps the Philippine trailer's cheeks, bro.
If you don't knock him out, you are.
There are acting issues, particularly from Agamula.
His facial expressions and delivery were too exaggerated and on the nose, and it may take you out, especially at the start of the movie. However, it does grow on you, and that's why the movie had the effect it did on me. The supporting cast is right on the money, with John Arcilla, Joel Torre, JC Santos, Bella Padilla. Even the child actress was great. The script does have problems.
At times, the film gets extremely campy, and this can be jarring for a movie that gets very dramatic and bleak. The tone's shifting isn't done smoothly, and is a major flaw by the script and the editor. The movie is a great watch and is definitely moving, especially if you don't have the original version to compare it to. It has some flaws from the production side,
but the story, also supported strongly by the music score, is very moving and it grabs you, especially by the end.
Miracle in Cell Number 7 definitely deserves to be on this list.
Next up is Beauty and the Bestie. This is the Vice Ganda movie with James Reid and Nadine Lustra as well. And as usual, this movie has a bunch of issues. One of them is that they took way too long to get to the plot. They spent far too much time dabbling and telling jokes. Honestly, some of them were pretty funny for a change, but then again, majority still felt like a waste of time and precious spacing that is important to every movie. Like, look at this joke about the Lion King.
Who is your father?
My father is Simba, the Lion King!
Like, what the fuck, bro? What the fuck is this shit, man? This is so... What? Okay, I mean, it's pretty cringe, I'm not gonna lie. Every Vice Ganda movie has some huge cringe like this, but who's the editor dumb enough to put this crap on the trailer? They add sound effects now, which would later become more trendy and cancerous in these types of films. It's proof that the editor knows that these jokes are cringe.
Halika na! Alam mo, maisahan mo ko?
Also, this really sexual gay moaning sound is getting really annoying.
Kailangan kita.
Alright, A Second Chance. This movie, I have mostly good things to say. The pacing is great, rarely a dull moment. This movie is a continuation of One More Chance, which I previously made a video on, check that out.
This movie told a brand new story. It definitely felt like a continuation from its prequel, One More Chance, and it's definitely not one more remake.
It went from being a boyfriend-girlfriend story to a marriage story. No, not that one, not that one. John Lloyd Cruz, in my opinion, gave the best performance out of the whole cast, followed closely by Bea Alonzo. And an improvement, honestly, from her previous depiction of the same role. Another thing that I should commend this film for is that the acting didn't have that quirky, theatrical star cinema acting. Some of the lesser characters came off that way. What can we do? You can always expect a good or at least decent performance from Bea and JLC, especially if the material is good. They're definitely not these dull characters that are played by some of our most popular actors. When Star Cinema wants to do good, they actually can pull it off. Some of you subscribers know that I'm not really a huge fan of Star Cinema rom-coms because they're mostly cheesy and predictable with very little storytelling value. And the artistic side of filmmaking, they usually bring nothing new to the table. But here I can appreciate it for what it is. A decent Star Cinema romantic movie which usually leads to a pretty decent, actually Netflix and chill experience. Ganda Rapido, The Revenger Squad. Okay, let's get into the shit. This is actually my first Vice Ganda film. A little trivia for you, ever since I planned to start this channel, I guess I realized eventually I'm going to have to get into these types of movies. And as I'm sure you could have guessed, I was deeply disappointed. It was the first film where the joke to my laugh ratio was unbelievably disproportionate.
It was like 0 laughs out of 1,000 jokes. And I was like, this is it? This is what all the box office hype was about?
Because I kinda expected that the story was gonna be pretty lackluster, and the acting won't be all that, but I definitely didn't expect this train wreck of a movie. Everything's just so bad. The costume design looks like it's of teleserie quality. Like, for a movie that makes this much money, it's pretty goddamn disappointing. But this is what they could produce.
Don't even get me started on the acting and editing.
Ano yan? Asong na betchin!
With all that said, unfortunately, I don't even think this is Vice Ganda's worst film in this list.
Next on this list, Fantastica! Don't even waste your time with this bullshit. Finally, the last Vice Ganda film in this list. Coming in at number 3 for the highest grossing movie of the decade, and formerly number 1 all-time for a couple years, The Super Parental Guardians.
This came out the year the MMFF decided to cut out a bunch of commercially produced films by big name production companies and decided to put in lesser known independent films.
Of course, this movie just kicked the box office's ass, which led to the firing of some of the film festival's executive board members. Made a video on that if you're interested. Okay, why is that? This is actually Vice Ganda's best film. While I don't think it deserved to be number 1 all-time at one point or any of his movies,
I do believe it deserves to be Vice's most successful movie. Some of the issues that make up a Vice Ganda film are still there, but minimal surprisingly.
the intro scene with the action scene was pretty good. And honestly set the tone that this is going to be a different movie. The side characters, particularly the kids played by Onyok and Aura, are definitely the highlight of this particular movie. Although when Vice Ganda takes over the scene, it becomes far less interesting.
A lot of his jokes just don't land too.
The editing and cinematography, wow, it's surprisingly good.
It's not award-winning material, but you could tell the people making this film were taking it pretty seriously.
And by now, some of my subscribers are wondering why. Well, just because I make almost completely one-sided reviews of Vice Ganda's films, because they deserve it, does not mean I don't know how to acknowledge when a film is doing right. This has the most storytelling out of all the movies of Vice in this list. There are scenes where I thought they would move away from the story to tell stupid jokes, but for the most part, they stuck with the plot and timed the jokes properly. Which leads me to the biggest problem I had by the final act. They just dropped it and went full clown mode. They were doing a good job developing the story, progressing the plot, but to my disappointment, they pretty much went nowhere. Most Vice Ganda films would kinda riff and go in different directions, unguided for the most part, and this is according to my friend who worked on a Vice Ganda film on set once. They would change the script and adapt to Vice's quote-unquote new ideas. Yes, the actor would come up with crappy jokes on set, which would force the production team to adapt and revise real time. And of course, that has its consequences. But this movie appears to stick to its guns, aside from the final act, which ruined it. I hate that I'll end reviewing Vice Ganda's films on this video on a mostly positive note, but it is what it is.
Eddie wow!
Number 2, highest grossing Filipino movie of the decade, and formerly number 1 all time, The House of Us. This movie smashed all previous box office records at that time and became at one point the number 1 highest grossing movie,
Becoming the first movie to reach 700 million and 800 million, I think 600 million as well. So if you watched my last video, I did a more substantial and in-depth analysis of the movie, so go watch that if you need a little refresher or a different perspective on the movie. The creative aspects of this film was a bit of a refresher. Though they didn't constantly stick to it, I thought it was okay. It shows me that it wasn't a lazily made movie. The intro scene really got to me. I mean, look at that. That requires quite a bit of planning and a lot of moving stuff around.
I really do love the production design of the house they are in specifically.
And if you ask me which is my favorite character, it's not Primo or George. It's the house. Seriously speaking, the place really does feel like you've been there. It feels like home, and this leads to a level of immersion that's really nice to get into. But this is where you draw the line between production design and cinematography, and how both are correlated but do not necessarily make each other up at the same level. The cinematography here is pretty lackluster.
I definitely liked Hello Love Goodbyes more.
I might make a video on Star Cinema cinematography some days. Comment below if you want to see that. I like the chemistry between Daniel Padilla and Catherine Bernardo. Suspect the reason why Alden jived so well with Catherine and Hello Love Goodbye was because the director was like, yo, just act like Daniel Padilla, bro.
Seriously though, these two do set a good example of what a good couple should be like, especially in a movie.
Although the performances were generally good, there were some lines in the script that were kinda that the actors could have definitely done a better job with.
I'm not gonna rate this movie with the same scale I would use to rate Parasite or Goodfellas or anything like that, because I could give those movies like an 8.5 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 and no one would complain.
I believe that the average viewer would find this movie experience more than satisfactory.
It follows its themes closely and doesn't dabble around too much. Side characters can be improved, fleshed out, and be less one-dimensional, but it doesn't ruin the film. Last but definitely not the least, but in fact the highest grossing movie of the decade and for now, all time, Hello Love Goodbye. I did make a review of this previously on my channel, so you can check that out.
I touched on this earlier. The cinematography of this movie is good. Hong Kong looks amazing here. Though there exist issues such as drone shots, personally I'm not a fan of it because it's very obvious to me that it's different footage, and it takes me out of the film. This may not be a big issue to other people.
This movie went a little against the grain when it comes to some of the topics it chooses to explore, and some may feel a little bit too real, honestly. The marketing of this movie was something else too. They obviously did away with the love team pairings,
which caused a lot of discussion on social media and everywhere else. Some say that this movie wasn't just a love story and tackled social issues. And to them, that was definitely something new and commendable. But to us Filipino cinephiles, well, yeah. And of course, I've talked about in my other video the most outstanding part of this movie, which is the characters. They're definitely the most well-written characters out of all the movies on this list. Though the script was still very rough at times, and it's apparent when they're forcing kilig to the viewers. This wasn't as strong plot-wise as The House of Us, structurally and thematically, but all in all, it's still a good movie. This decade proved to be a very tricky period for movies and your average moviegoers. While we all have our opinions and taste for movies, this proved to me that just because a movie is popular and well marketed doesn't mean it's worth seeing. A lot of great films deserve to be on this list, but they aren't because people don't want to watch them, and this results in poor funding and lack of marketing and supports the cycle.
Unfortunately, people do judge a book by its cover, and if the cover is very playful or vibrant, or promises a good time, this is probably what they want to see.
However, this is a result of a lack of respect for the medium they are consuming. Movies can definitely be an art form that you can look at and admire just for pure craftsmanship in production and storytelling. It can also be educational, or it can affect an entire society's attitude and beliefs.
Likewise, you can say a lot about a society by looking at what type of content they consume.
If you're a subscriber of mine, which might mean you agree with a lot of what I say, you may think that people's choices in movies are the dumbest shit ever. But to these people, it only makes sense about consuming the one that can give them the most entertainment as possible. Even though it's not even good entertainment, it's certainly perceived that way from how it's marketed and how their friends may talk about it. But I believe the worst has already passed. These past 2 years proved to be a promising start for the next decade of films. The newest additions to the list, The House of Us, Hello Love Goodbye, and Miracle and Cell Number 7 are the best movies on this list. So this shows the interests of the masses are shifting into quality films. Still, they're not masterpieces. They're much better than Vice Ganda scrappy comedies. So for me, that's a win. And also props to the producers for stepping up. I'm definitely looking forward to the 2020s.
Assuming coronavirus doesn't get all of us.
Please like the video and subscribe to support our growing channel, and I'll see you in the next video.